Sir. I think your daughter just saved my life. The words hung in the hallway long after they were spoken, quiet enough to be mistaken for a whisper, yet powerful enough to stop Ethan Carter from taking another breath. His hand remained on the polished brass doorknob of the presidential suite as he stared at the young woman standing before him. Midnight had wrapped the 23rd floor of the Grand Crescent Hotel in an almost sacred stillness. The soft golden lights along the corridor reflected across marble walls, while rain tapped gently against the towering windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Ethan had expected room service, perhaps a manager with tomorrow's itinerary, maybe even another business emergency that refused to wait until sunrise. Instead, he found a stranger whose soaked sweater clung to her shoulders, whose trembling hands held nothing except an old canvas backpack, and whose tired blue eyes carried a sincerity that money could never purchase. She couldn't have been older than 24. Her chestnut hair was damp from the rain, loose strands framing a face untouched by expensive makeup or practiced charm. She looked exhausted but not defeated. There was a quiet dignity about her that reminded Ethan of people he had known before success became the language everyone expected him to speak. Neither of them said another word. Somewhere down the hallway, an elevator chimed softly before its doors closed again. The scent of fresh lilies from the hotel's evening arrangements drifted through the air, mixing with the clean fragrance left behind by the passing storm. Ethan finally found his voice. "I'm sorry, have we met?" The young woman slowly shook her head. "No, sir." "Then how does my daughter know you?" She lowered her eyes for a brief moment, almost as if she were choosing every word with extraordinary care. "She doesn't." "Not really?" "She only smiled at me for a few seconds this afternoon." Ethan frowned. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, had spent the day exploring the hotel's indoor gardens while he attended meetings that seemed to stretch endlessly from breakfast until sunset. She loved smiling at strangers. His late wife used to say. Lily believed every person deserved one kind moment each day. Ethan had never imagined such a simple habit could bring someone to his door in the middle of the night. "Please," the young woman said gently, "I promise I'm not here asking for money. I'm not asking for a job. I only needed to tell you something before I left this city forever." Ethan studied her face. Over the past decade, countless people had approached him hoping to gain something from the billionaire whose name appeared on luxury hotels across the country. Some carried business proposals. Others invented heartbreaking stories. A few simply wanted a photograph. But none of them had looked at him the way this young woman did now. There was no calculation in her eyes. Only gratitude so genuine that it felt almost unfamiliar. He stepped aside and opened the door wider. "It's late," he said quietly. "You shouldn't be standing out here in the rain. Come inside for a minute and tell me what happened." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with accepting even the smallest kindness. "I don't want to intrude." Ethan offered a faint smile, one that had become painfully rare since losing his wife 5 years earlier. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the most important conversations begin with someone knocking on the wrong door." The young woman looked up, and for the first time that night, hope flickered across her face like the first light before dawn. Neither of them knew that this quiet midnight conversation would become the beginning of a story neither wealth nor success could have ever written. Ethan closed the suite door quietly behind her as the soft click echoed through the spacious living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the shimmering skyline beyond the rain, while the fireplace cast a gentle amber glow across polished walnut floors. The room was elegant without feeling cold, but to Emily Brooks it looked like another world entirely. She stood near the entrance, clutching the worn canvas backpack against her chest as though it were the only thing she still owned. Ethan noticed that her shoes were soaked through, leaving tiny drops of water on the marble. Without saying a word, he walked toward a nearby cabinet, retrieved a clean towel, and offered it to her. She accepted it with both hands. "Thank you." Her voice was almost too soft to hear. "Please sit down," Ethan said. "You have had a long day." Emily hesitated before carefully choosing the very edge of a chair instead of the comfortable leather sofa. It was the kind of small decision that revealed more about her character than any introduction could. She did not want to leave the slightest impression that she expected comfort she had not earned. Ethan poured 2 cups of hot chamomile tea from the kettle that had been prepared earlier that evening. He placed one in front of her. She wrapped both hands around the warm mug but did not drink. For several quiet seconds neither of them spoke. The silence did not feel awkward. It felt respectful. Finally Emily looked up. "This afternoon your daughter was in the hotel garden near the fountain." Ethan smiled faintly. "That sounds like Lily. She saw me sitting on a bench." Emily swallowed before continuing. "I was trying not to cry because I had just learned that the interview I traveled 600 miles for had been cancelled before I even arrived." Ethan listened without interrupting. "I had almost no money left. I had nowhere to go after checking out of the small motel where I stayed last night. I kept telling myself I would figure something out, but for the first time in my life I honestly did not know what tomorrow would look like." She looked down at the untouched tea. "Then your little girl walked over and asked if I liked butterflies." Ethan could almost picture the moment. Lily had always believed every stranger could become a friend with the right question. Emily smiled for the first time, and the sadness in her eyes softened. "She showed me a drawing she had made with colorful butterflies flying above a little house." Then she pointed at the words she wrote underneath. Emily paused as emotion caught her voice. It said, "Everyone deserves a place that feels like home." Ethan lowered his eyes. Those words sounded exactly like something his late wife would have taught their daughter to write. "Lily told me that whenever someone feels lonely, they should keep looking because home sometimes finds people before people find home." Emily let out a quiet breath. "She only stayed with me for maybe 2 minutes before your assistant called her back. She probably forgot about me before dinner." She slowly shook her head. "But I did not forget her. After months of hearing nothing except rejection, disappointment, and silence, one little girl reminded me that kindness still exists." Ethan felt something shift inside him, something he had buried beneath schedules, board meetings, and endless responsibilities. Emily looked directly into his eyes. "I came here tonight because I could not leave Chicago without thanking the father who raised a child capable of giving hope to someone she did not even know. You may never realize what that gift was worth, but I promise you it was worth more than anything money could have bought me today." Ethan remained silent for several moments, letting Emily's words settle into the quiet warmth of the suite. During years of negotiating billion-dollar contracts, he had learned that the loudest voices usually wanted something. Tonight the softest voice he had heard in a very long time wanted nothing at all. That alone made it unforgettable. He looked toward the family photograph resting beside the fireplace. Lily was laughing in the picture while sitting on the shoulders of her mother during a summer trip to Lake Michigan years before illness had quietly rewritten all of their lives. Emily noticed his eyes drift toward the photograph but asked no questions. She respected the silence between memories. Ethan finally smiled, although there was sadness behind it. Her mother used to tell Lily that kindness is the only investment that always grows. Emily glanced at the picture and nodded gently. She taught her well. Ethan lowered his eyes for a brief moment. She did. I only try to continue what she started. The rain outside had become lighter now, leaving tiny streams running across the glass like silver threads under the city lights. Somewhere below, traffic moved steadily through the streets, but up on the 23rd floor the world felt strangely distant. Ethan leaned back in his chair. What was the interview for? Emily looked almost embarrassed to answer. Front desk receptionist at a small hotel near Navy Pier. Ethan raised an eyebrow with quiet curiosity. You wanted to work in hospitality? She nodded. I grew up in a small town in Missouri. My grandmother owned a little bed and breakfast. It only had 6 rooms, but she believed every guest should feel like family before they left. I loved helping her after school. Her smile became warmer as she remembered. She used to tell me that people rarely remember the size of a room. They remember how someone made them feel while they were inside it. Ethan could not help smiling. Your grandmother was wiser than many executives I know. Emily laughed softly, the first genuine laugh of the evening. It carried no bitterness, only honesty. She never finished college, but she understood people better than anyone I have ever met. Ethan found himself asking another question before he realized it. What happened after she passed away? Emily's fingers rested quietly around the teacup. I took care of my mother while she was sick. After she recovered enough to live independently again, I decided it was finally time to chase the dream I had postponed for years. She looked around the elegant suite with admiration rather than envy. I thought Chicago would be the place where everything finally began. Her smile faded only slightly. Instead, the company canceled the interview because they filled the position early. Nobody bothered to tell me until I arrived. Ethan could hear disappointment in her voice, but not resentment. That distinction mattered. Many people blamed the world for their hardships. Emily simply accepted them and kept walking. He stood and walked toward the large window overlooking the city. Thousands of lights stretched toward the horizon, each one representing another family, another story, another hope waiting for tomorrow morning. Without turning around, he spoke quietly. Do you know what I have learned after spending 20 years building hotels? Emily shook her head. The finest buildings in the world cannot create warmth. Only the people inside them can. She smiled. I believe that. Ethan turned back toward her, studying the calm determination that remained in her expression despite everything she had endured that day. Something told him she was exactly the kind of person every hotel needed, even if she did not yet realize it herself. He made a decision but kept it hidden behind an ordinary question. Emily, where are you planning to sleep tonight? She lowered her eyes before answering with complete honesty. I was hoping to stay in the bus terminal until the first morning bus leaves at 6 o'clock. After that, I was going to figure out the rest one step at a time. Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the small writing desk near the window and looked down at the city that never truly slept. Thousands of headlights drifted through the streets below like quiet rivers of light, reminding him that every person carried a destination no one else could fully understand. When he finally turned back, there was no trace of pity in his expression, only calm respect. No one should spend the night in a bus terminal when there are empty rooms upstairs, he said gently. Emily immediately shook her head. I cannot accept that. Why not? Because I did not come here looking for help. Ethan nodded. I know. Then I should leave while I still have enough pride to walk away on my own. Her answer surprised him more than any business negotiation ever had. Most people would have accepted luxury without hesitation. Emily seemed determined to protect something far more valuable than comfort. She wanted to protect her dignity. Ethan smiled softly. Then let me ask you something. She looked up. If Lily were standing outside in the rain someday, and someone offered her a safe place to sleep with no expectation of anything in return, would you hope she accepted? Emily opened her mouth but no words came. The question settled quietly between them. After several seconds she lowered her eyes with a faint smile. Yes. Then allow me the same peace of mind tonight. She looked at him for a long moment before giving a small, reluctant nod. Only for tonight. Only for tonight, Ethan agreed. He picked up the suite telephone and called the night manager. His voice remained completely ordinary, giving no indication that he owned the hotel itself. Good evening. Could you prepare one of the garden view guest rooms for a visitor? Also, please have breakfast delivered there at 8 tomorrow morning. He paused for a moment before adding, charge everything to my personal account. Emily listened quietly. She assumed he was simply a generous businessman staying at the hotel, nothing more. The call ended less than a minute later. Ethan placed the receiver back in its cradle and reached into a nearby cabinet, taking out a neatly folded hotel umbrella. The room is on the 19th floor. We can take the private elevator. Emily stood slowly, still looking uncertain. You have already done more than enough. Ethan shook his head. No. My daughter did the important part. I am only following her example. That answer made Emily smile again. Together they stepped into the quiet hallway where the thick carpet softened every footstep. The building felt almost peaceful at this hour, with only the distant hum of elevators and the faint melody of piano music drifting from the lobby several floors below. As they waited for the elevator, Emily glanced toward a large framed photograph displaying the hotel's grand opening ceremony years earlier. Hundreds of employees stood together, smiling proudly beneath a banner celebrating excellence in hospitality. It must be wonderful working somewhere that values people, she said quietly. Ethan followed her gaze. It is supposed to be. The elevator doors opened with a gentle chime. They stepped inside, and the mirrored walls reflected two strangers whose lives had unexpectedly crossed paths because of one little girl's kindness. During the short ride downward, neither of them spoke. The silence no longer belonged to uncertainty. It belonged to trust beginning to take root. When the doors opened again, a smiling night manager was already waiting beside a polished luggage cart even though Emily carried nothing except her worn backpack. He greeted Ethan respectfully. Good evening, Mr. Carter. Ethan offered only a small nod before the manager turned warmly toward Emily. Welcome. We are honored to have you as our guest. Emily blinked with surprise. She had never heard someone say those words to her with such sincerity. For the first time since arriving in Chicago, she felt as though she belonged somewhere, even if only until sunrise. The next morning arrived with a pale golden sunrise spilling across Lake Michigan, painting the city in quiet shades of amber and blue. Emily woke before her alarm, almost forgetting where she was. For a brief moment she stared at the ceiling, expecting the faded motel room from the night before. Instead she found soft morning light filtering through elegant curtains and the gentle sound of birds drifting from the rooftop garden below. Everything felt peaceful, yet strangely unfamiliar. She sat up slowly, folded the blankets neatly without thinking, and placed the complimentary slippers exactly where she had found them. Her grandmother had always taught her to leave every room better than she found it. A gentle knock came at exactly 8 o'clock. Emily opened the door to find a smiling attendant wheeling in breakfast. Fresh fruit, warm biscuits, scrambled eggs, oatmeal, orange juice, and coffee rested beneath polished silver covers. Good morning, Miss Brooks, the attendant said warmly. We hope you enjoy your breakfast. Emily looked surprised. Thank you very much. After the attendant left, she noticed a handwritten card resting beside the coffee cup. It contained only one sentence. Kindness should never end with one conversation. Enjoy your morning. Ethan. She smiled quietly before folding the note and slipping it carefully inside her backpack. It felt too thoughtful to throw away. Nearly an hour later she checked out of the guest room, insisting that the front desk accept the room key personally instead of leaving it inside. The young receptionist smiled. We hope to welcome you again someday. Emily returned the smile. I hope so too. She stepped outside into the crisp Chicago morning, breathing deeply as cool lake air brushed gently across her face. She had no interview, no job, and no clear destination, yet something inside her felt lighter than it had the day before. Sometimes hope alone could make a person stand taller. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone in a private breakfast lounge overlooking the hotel's central garden. Lily was happily eating pancakes while coloring another page in her sketchbook. She looked up with bright eyes. Daddy, did the butterfly lady find her home? Ethan nearly dropped his coffee cup. Butterfly lady? Lily nodded enthusiastically. The nice lady in the garden yesterday. She looked sad, so I gave her my drawing. Ethan smiled with quiet amazement. She found a safe place to stay last night. Lily grinned. I knew she would. Children often accepted miracles without questioning them. Adults usually needed proof. Ethan watched his daughter add another colorful butterfly to her drawing before asking gently, "Why did you choose her?" Lily shrugged as though the answer were obvious. Because everyone else kept walking past her. Ethan looked down at his untouched coffee. Such simple words carried extraordinary weight. He had spent years building luxury hotels designed to welcome thousands of guests, yet it took an 8-year-old little girl to remind him that the people most in need were often the easiest to overlook. Just then his executive assistant, Daniel Foster, approached the table carrying a leather portfolio. Good morning, Mr. Carter. The board meeting begins in 40 minutes. Ethan nodded absent-mindedly. Daniel, may I ask you something? Of course. How many open entry-level positions do we currently have across this property? Daniel looked mildly surprised. Several, including guest services, concierge support, hospitality training, and front desk operations. Ethan stared through the garden windows where hotel employees greeted arriving guests with genuine smiles. Good hospitality cannot be taught if kindness is missing. Daniel waited quietly, sensing there was more coming. Ethan finally stood and adjusted his jacket. Find out whether a young woman named Emily Brooks is still in the building. Daniel blinked. Should I tell her who you are? Ethan looked toward Lily, who was carefully coloring another butterfly beside a little wooden house. He smiled softly before answering. No. Not yet. I would rather she meet the man before she discovers the title. Emily had barely reached the corner across from the hotel when she heard someone calling her name. She turned to see Daniel Foster walking toward her with an easy smile and an umbrella tucked beneath one arm even though the morning sky had already cleared. Miss Brooks, he asked politely. Emily nodded. Yes. Daniel stopped a respectful distance away. I hope I am not interrupting your plans. She smiled gently. That depends on whether you know what my plans are. Daniel laughed softly. Fair enough. Mr. Carter asked me to see if you were still nearby. Emily looked surprised. Is everything all right? More than all right, I hope. He reached into his portfolio and carefully removed a single envelope. Our hospitality training department had an unexpected opening become available this morning. The position includes paid training, temporary employee housing, and the opportunity to earn a permanent role based entirely on performance. Emily stared at the envelope without touching it. Why are you giving this to me? Daniel answered honestly. Because Mr. Carter believes character is much harder to find than experience. Emily looked down at the envelope again. Did he tell you that? Those were almost his exact words. For several quiet seconds she remained still while morning commuters passed along the sidewalk carrying coffee cups and briefcases. Finally she looked back at Daniel. Did he create this position because he felt sorry for me? Daniel shook his head immediately. No, Miss Brooks. I have worked with Mr. Carter for 12 years. He does not make business decisions out of pity. Emily searched his face, trying to decide whether to believe him. Then why me? Daniel smiled. Because yesterday a little girl showed kindness to a stranger. Last night that stranger crossed the city simply to say thank you. This morning the same stranger was still more concerned about her dignity than her comfort. Those are qualities our company cannot teach. Emily slowly accepted the envelope but did not open it. If I accept an interview, I want to earn the position. Honestly. That is exactly what Mr. Carter expects. Daniel pointed toward the hotel behind them. The interview begins in 30 minutes with the Director of Guest Experience. Your application will be evaluated exactly like everyone else's. Emily finally smiled. Then I would like the opportunity. Back inside the hotel, Ethan was listening to quarterly financial reports inside an elegant executive boardroom. A presentation filled the large screen with charts, projections, and expansion plans reaching several states across the country. Around the polished conference table, executives discussed occupancy rates and investment forecasts with practiced confidence. Ethan listened politely, but part of his mind remained elsewhere. His phone vibrated softly beneath the table. A brief message from Daniel appeared on the screen. She accepted the interview, but only after making sure she would earn it fairly. Ethan smiled almost imperceptibly before placing the phone face down. The board chair noticed. Good news? Ethan looked around the room. Possibly. The meeting continued for another hour, yet Ethan found himself thinking less about numbers and more about something his late wife once told him. She used to say that every hotel should feel like a story waiting to welcome someone home. Somewhere along the way, success had buried that simple truth beneath balance sheets and construction schedules. Meanwhile, Emily sat quietly outside the interview room reviewing the company's hospitality handbook. She had borrowed a pen from the front desk and filled several pages of notes with careful handwriting. Every employee who walked past smiled warmly, and every smile reminded her of her grandmother's little bed and breakfast back in Missouri. When the office door finally opened, the director greeted her with a welcoming expression. Miss Brooks, thank you for waiting. Please come in. Emily stood, took one steady breath, and walked forward with quiet confidence, never realizing that behind a darkened observation window at the far end of the corridor, Ethan watched for only a brief moment before quietly walking away. He did not want to influence the decision. If Emily became part of this hotel, he wanted it to be because she belonged there, not because his name opened the door. The interview lasted nearly an hour, yet to Emily it felt more like a conversation than an examination. The director of guest experience, Margaret Ellis, asked about resumes, previous work, and customer service, but she spent even more time asking questions that had nothing to do with qualifications. Tell me about the kindest person you have ever met. Describe a moment when someone disappointed you but you still chose compassion. What does hospitality mean to you when no one is watching? Emily answered every question without rehearsed phrases or polished corporate language. She spoke about her grandmother remembering every guest's favorite breakfast, about staying late to clean rooms because exhausted travelers deserved fresh sheets, and about believing that respect should never depend on someone's appearance or income. Margaret listened carefully, writing only a few notes before finally closing the folder in front of her. Miss Brooks, she said warmly, technical skills can be taught. Character usually cannot. Emily smiled politely. My grandmother used to say the same thing. Margaret stood and extended her hand. Welcome to the first step of our hospitality training program. Emily blinked in surprise. Does that mean? Margaret nodded. It means you earned your place. Relief washed over Emily's face, followed almost immediately by grateful disbelief. She accepted the handshake with both hands. Thank you. I promise I will work harder than anyone expects. Something tells me you already have. As Emily left the office, she paused beside the large windows overlooking the hotel's indoor garden. Guests wandered peacefully among blooming flowers while sunlight poured through the glass ceiling. For the first time in many years, tomorrow no longer felt frightening. Across the building, Ethan quietly reviewed the interview summary Margaret had personally delivered. There were no exaggerated compliments, only simple observations. Honest. Calm under pressure. Exceptional empathy. Listens before speaking. Treats everyone equally. Ethan smiled as he reached the final handwritten sentence at the bottom of the page. She naturally creates the feeling that every guest matters. He folded the report carefully and placed it inside his leather notebook instead of leaving it with the other personnel files. Daniel entered the office carrying the afternoon schedule. Everything went well? Ethan looked up. Better than I expected. Daniel hesitated before asking, will you tell her now? Ethan slowly shook his head. Not yet. She is going to find out eventually. I know. Ethan walked toward the window overlooking the hotel entrance where guests arrived from every corner of the country. Families, business travelers, newly married couples, retired veterans, college students, all carrying different stories beneath the same roof. I have spent too much of my life wondering whether people saw me or simply saw my last name. Daniel understood immediately. You want her opinion before she learns the truth. Ethan nodded. Exactly. At that same moment, Lily came running down the hallway after finishing an afternoon art class held inside the Children's Activity Center. She burst into Ethan's office holding another drawing covered with bright butterflies. Daddy, guess what? Ethan laughed as he knelt beside her. What happened? I saw the butterfly lady again. Ethan tried not to smile too quickly. Really? Lily nodded excitedly. She helped another little boy find his mommy in the lobby. He was crying, so she sat with him until his mom came back. Then she made him laugh. Ethan looked toward Daniel, who quietly smiled in return. No interview panel could have measured that moment. No resume could have predicted it. Lily held up her newest drawing. This time the little wooden house had grown larger, and 3 people stood together beneath colorful butterflies floating across a bright blue sky. Ethan studied the picture for a long moment before softly asking, who are they? Lily answered with complete certainty, the kind only children seem able to possess. People who have not figured out they are family yet. 3 weeks passed quietly, measured not by calendar pages but by small moments that slowly changed the rhythm of everyday life. Emily arrived before every shift, greeted every employee by name, and somehow remembered details that even longtime managers overlooked. She learned which guests preferred extra pillows, which elderly couple always requested tea instead of coffee, and which young bellman was studying hospitality management at night after finishing his shift. Kindness seemed to come as naturally to her as breathing. She never realized how many people noticed. Ethan watched from a distance whenever circumstances allowed. Sometimes he observed through security monitors while reviewing operations. Other times he happened to pass through the lobby just as Emily was patiently helping a confused visitor read a city map or kneeling beside a frightened child until anxious parents returned. Every quiet act reminded him that true hospitality could never be manufactured. It had to grow from the heart. One Friday evening the hotel hosted its annual foundation gala, bringing together business leaders, community volunteers, and charitable organizations beneath sparkling chandeliers and soft orchestral music. Emily had been assigned to guest services, welcoming visitors as they arrived. She wore the same elegant employee uniform as everyone else, her name badge polished carefully before every shift. She did not know the event was hosted by the very man who had changed the direction of her life only weeks earlier. Shortly before the ballroom doors opened, Margaret approached with an apologetic expression. Emily, would you mind delivering these welcome folders to the executive lounge on the top floor? Mr. Carter requested them before tonight's presentation. Emily smiled. Of course. She collected the folders and rode the private elevator upward, admiring the golden sunset stretching across the Chicago skyline through the glass walls. When the elevator doors opened, the executive floor was almost silent. Plush carpets softened every footstep, and warm lighting reflected across polished wood paneling. She followed the room numbers until she reached the final suite. The doors stood slightly open. Emily knocked gently anyway. Excuse me, I have the welcome materials. Ethan looked up from a stack of notes spread across the conference table. Please come in. She stepped inside, placed the folders neatly on the table, and glanced around the elegant room. Family photographs rested beside framed architectural drawings of hotels across the country. One large picture immediately caught her attention. It showed Ethan standing beside Lily at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the very hotel where she now worked. Above them hung a bronze plaque engraved with the words, Founder and Chairman, Carter Hospitality Group. Emily froze. Her eyes slowly moved from the photograph to Ethan, then back again. The silence became almost tangible. You. She whispered. Ethan closed the folder in front of him and stood quietly. Yes. Emily searched his face as dozens of small moments suddenly fit together like pieces of a puzzle. The private suite. The staff greeting him with unusual respect. The effortless way doors always seemed to open. The handwritten note. Daniel's confidence. Everything suddenly made sense. She took one slow step backward. You own this hotel? Ethan answered honestly. Yes. Her voice remained calm, but disappointment settled gently behind it. You never told me. I wanted you to know me first. Emily looked down at the welcome folders resting on the polished table. All this time I believed someone simply showed kindness because they understood what it felt like to struggle. Ethan's expression softened. That was true. She shook her head slightly. But I cannot know whether I earned my place here or whether everyone was simply following the wishes of the owner. Ethan walked no closer, giving her the space to think. Your interview panel never knew I recommended you. Emily looked toward the city beyond the windows where evening lights slowly awakened across Chicago. Maybe that is true. She smiled sadly, though there was no anger in her eyes. But now every compliment will feel different. She picked up her employee identification badge and gently placed it on the conference table. I think it is better if I leave before I begin doubting myself. Ethan watched quietly as she turned toward the door. He wanted to stop her. He wanted to explain everything. Yet something deep inside reminded him that real respect never held someone in place against their own conscience. The door closed softly behind her, leaving only silence inside the room, and for the first time since that rainy midnight, Ethan realized that money could build magnificent hotels, but it could never persuade an honest heart to stay. Emily left the hotel that evening carrying nothing except her backpack and the quiet conviction that some distances could not be crossed, no matter how sincere two people might be. She mailed her employee identification badge to Human Resources the following morning along with a handwritten note thanking the staff for treating her with kindness. There were no accusations, no bitterness, only gratitude. Ethan read the note alone in his office and folded it carefully beside the first handwritten card she had ever received from him. The silence inside the room felt heavier than any board meeting he had ever attended. Days passed. Then a week. Lily noticed first. Daddy, she asked one evening while coloring butterflies at the kitchen table, why does the house feel quiet again? Ethan looked around the beautiful home that suddenly seemed much larger than before. He smiled sadly. Sometimes we do not realize someone has filled a room with light until they are gone. Lily thought about that for a long moment before walking to her bedroom. She returned carrying the drawing she had made weeks earlier, the one with 3 people standing beneath colorful butterflies beside a little wooden house. She placed it gently into Ethan's hands. Maybe you are looking in the wrong place. Ethan studied the picture, then looked at his daughter. Children often found simple answers adults complicated with fear. Late that evening he quietly left the house carrying only the drawing and one small envelope. Nearly midnight had settled over Chicago by the time he reached a modest boarding house on the north side of the city where Daniel had discreetly learned Emily was staying while searching for new work. Ethan stood outside her apartment door for several seconds before finally knocking softly. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened. Emily looked genuinely surprised to see him standing there with rain resting lightly on his coat. Neither of them spoke at first. The hallway was silent except for the distant hum of an old elevator somewhere downstairs. Ethan smiled gently. A few weeks ago someone knocked on my door in the middle of the night because she wanted to say thank you. Tonight I hoped you might allow me to do the same. Emily looked into his eyes, searching for the businessman, the billionaire, the owner. Instead, she saw only the same quiet father who had offered a stranger a warm place to rest. Ethan held out the small envelope. Inside is your interview evaluation from Margaret Ellis. I did not write one word of it. Neither did Daniel. Every recommendation came from people who had never been told who you were to me. Emily slowly opened the envelope. Her eyes moved across the handwritten comments she remembered hearing during the interview. Honest. Calm under pressure. Exceptional empathy. Naturally creates the feeling that every guest matters. At the bottom, Margaret had added one final sentence. If we could fill every hotel with people like Miss Brooks, guests would remember our kindness long after they forgot our buildings. Emily looked up slowly, her eyes glistening with quiet emotion. Ethan unfolded Lily's drawing beside the evaluation. The colorful butterflies still floated above three smiling figures standing together outside a little home. Lily keeps asking when the butterfly lady is coming back, he said softly. I finally realized she was not asking about an employee. She was asking about someone who made our home feel alive again. Emily smiled through grateful tears, not because of the drawing alone, but because nothing he said had anything to do with wealth. It was about family. It was about belonging. It was about the quiet courage to begin again. She took one careful step forward. I never wanted your money, Ethan. He nodded. I know. I only wanted to know the man behind the kindness. Ethan smiled with peaceful certainty. Then perhaps we finally met each other honestly. Emily reached for his hand, and this time neither pride nor titles stood between them. Months later, guests often noticed a framed drawing hanging near the entrance of the Grand Crescent Hotel. It showed colorful butterflies above a small wooden house and three smiling figures standing together beneath a bright blue sky. There was no signature, only a simple message written in a child's careful handwriting. Everyone deserves a place that feels like home. And for those who stopped long enough to read it, the building somehow felt warmer before they even reached the front desk.